Welcome, everybody. We're back. Hello to our listeners. Thank you for tuning in to season 3 of Swoon-Worthy, a podcast hosted by two sisters with a passion for movies and series set in different time periods, also known as the period drama. I'm Carly, your co-host, along with my sister Kayla, and we are so excited to kick off our fall 2024 season. We have a handful of movies that are very much fall vibes. And in October, we're going to highlight some spook-worthy favorites. Today, we're kicking things off with Firebrand, a Tudor-era movie that's been on period drama enthusiasts' radar for a long time, and it was finally released this past summer. It came to theaters briefly, but now it's streaming, and my sister Kayla and I watched it together, and we can't wait to talk about it with you all. So this movie stars Alicia Vikander, Alicia, however you say her first name. And she plays the resilient Catherine Parr, the sixth wife of the terrifying Henry VIII, played by Jude Law. Kayla, you and I did a really fun podcast on Anne Boleyn in season 1. And we really dug into the fact that this man, Henry VIII, was a complete monster. How do you feel they portrayed him in this one, Firebrand?
I thought it was great. I feel like it was the most accurate ever. It wasn't
Like,
like the romanticized version. Like they weren't still trying to like make him attractive. He was just so vulgar, and I mean it was the end of his life, so he was at his most crazy, I guess. But I just thought Jude Law did a phenomenal job.
I agree. Yeah, no, I think, like you said, romanticized. There's often, even in The Tudors, which is a famous series, and you and I both enjoy it, he's there are good sides of him at the beginning, and you kind of still love him even at the end sometimes. But this one is like, no, we're throwing all that away. This is just him totally monstrous.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then there's the whole leg injury, which is lovely.
Ew. So yeah, this movie was so good. Like I feel like it was one of the best movies I've seen in a long time, but it was still uncomfortable at times to watch. But I'm sure it was like that in real life, you know?
Oh, totally. And sometimes I feel like you and I do like movies that kind of put you on edge, make you feel a bit uncomfortable, but they're just engaging. Because I remember a few of them. We saw Spencer together, which kind of has like a creepy, intense vibe. So I don't know. I just have these fun movie experiences with you that I think back to, and they're always kind of a bit of more of the intense movies.
But Spencer
No.
was good in theaters.
Yeah. And that one features Anne Boleyn briefly. I like the way they did that. The parallels between Lady Di and Anne Boleyn.
Yeah, but like watching this, it's just crazy because you're like, okay, sounds so familiar. The story of him and a
Mhm.
woman, but it's like it's a different woman. Like there's so many women that have gone through this terror of being his wife or even his daughter, and it's just so unfortunate.
No, that's a very good point. It's familiar yet unfamiliar because it is kind of a newer, um, less known wife, the sixth wife, Catherine Parr. Usually we focus on Anne or Catherine.
Yeah. Honestly, going into this, I was like, I mean, I'm sure it's gonna be kind of mild compared to the other women. Like it was his last wife. I'm sure he kind of toned down a bit of his crazy, but I was wrong.
Yes, totally crazy. And a little bit about the story because it's based off a book, a novel from 2013 called Queen's Gambit by Elizabeth Fremantle. And I mean, some of this is more of like fiction, this is kind of a bit historical fiction interwoven with real events. Okay. So when we talk about it, just so our listeners know, when Kayla and I talk about it, we're totally into the movie. We're talking about the movie as if it were real, knowing that sometimes there are discrepancies with what happened in history. But it's a really cool movie. And a few things just about the production before we jump into more of the story. So this movie filming began back in April of 2022. And here it is, 2024. We're just getting it. it took a while, I think, to find maybe a distributor or get it released. And did you know, Caleb, Michelle Williams was actually previously attached to the role but dropped out?
Oh, I'm glad.
No, no, I think it ended up
I feel like every
perfect.
period film about like a woman, they choose Michelle Williams, Nicole Kidman, or who else? There's like one more person, and it's always them.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Kira a little bit.
No, she's okay. But it's like, okay, let's choose someone else.
That's so funny. I don't know about you. I fell in love with Alicia Vikander back in 2012. So, two movies came out that year. She was Kitty in Anna Karenina, speaking of Keira Knightley. And her storyline is my favorite of that movie because it's not the best Anna Karenina adaptation, but her role as Kitty with Levin, and it's just I love it. She stole this show.
Yeah, I mean, I fell in love with her during that time period too, because she was in The Light Between Oceans with Michael
Well, that one, when
Fassbender.
was that one?
I think it was 2014.
Oh, okay. Brilliant.
And
I haven't seen that one. I
you
know
should
you've been
tell
trying
her.
to get me to watch that one.
No, I love her because that's where she met her husband, Michael Fassbender. And I just think that's so romantic that they met on that romantic movie scene set.
Okay, I just checked. It's 2016 that she was in Light
Oh,
Between the.
really? Oh,
Yeah,
my bad.
that's okay. No, just making a note of it. And then she's also in one of my favorite period dramas, A Royal Affair. It's a Danish film with Mads Mikkelsen, who is just amazing. She's Swedish. So Alicia Vikander's Swedish. She learned Danish for that movie back in 2012. I think she also has a ballet background. So she's just very versatile. She won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for what is it called? Uh The Danish Girl with Eddie Redmayne. I love her and I think she deserves an Oscar 100%, but I've always been a little bit like confused that she won Best Supporting Actress when I feel like she's the star of the movie.
Hmm.
Yeah, she has a lot of screen time, probably the most screen time for any Best Supporting Actress. Whereas like um Dame Judi Dench was on screen for 8 minutes as Best Supporting Actress in Shakespeare in Love, and then like Alicia Vikander was on screen for like the whole movie and still got a yeah. It was a little weird. I thought that was a little
But
weird.
was Eddie Redmayne the main character?
He was supposed to be the main character, but she did kind of steal the show a bit in that one.
Well, that's kind of weird because Reese Witherspoon won Best Actress for Walk the Line, and she wasn't technically the main character either.
Yeah, yeah. I think it all has to do with campaigning with the Oscars, so you got to take it with
There's politics involved.
a little bit. But that being said, I love the Oscars, and I do think she's worthy of an Oscar, Alicia. Like she's phenomenal. Um, and then I like how you mentioned her relationship with what's his name, Michael Fassbender. One more little note. Um, so you and I like the Michael Fassbender Jane Eyre from 2011. That movie was filmed at this beautiful estate in Derbyshire, the UK, Haddon Hall, Haddon, Haddon Hall. So Jane Eyre was filmed there, and then this movie, back bringing it back to Firebrand, was filmed at Haddon Hall. So
Oh,
yeah, just a little connection.
I love it.
And I follow them on Instagram because it's just I want to, Kayla. That's another place we have to add to our list.
Oh yeah, we're gonna take our European um travel
Tour.
podcast tour.
It's gonna happen, Kayla.
Okay, well, okay.
Okay, so now let's jump into the movie. And I love how it starts out sort of like a storybook is being read or a story is being told. And we get a voiceover. We don't really know who it is yet. And it's saying that Henry was an angry and ailing king. Two were cast out. One died in childbirth. Two had their heads struck from their body. So this is talking about the women before Catherine. And then we kind of learn it's Elizabeth speaking. So this is the young Princess Elizabeth. And kind of what you were saying earlier, how it sounds familiar. I think that was a good choice to do like Elizabeth as the narrator because we know her so well. Like, don't you feel like you know Queen Elizabeth? But then, like, this story is a bit less known. And she says that this is the mother that she's only ever known, because Catherine Parr became like a mother to Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward. Catherine Parr's beliefs definitely played a big part in Elizabeth's upbringing, right? And then we kind of get into the story where Henry's away at war with France. So Henry's not even there at first. And you get to see Catherine with the kids, and they're just learning. And then she goes off onto, outside on her horse. She goes on a little trip, a little journey. And she kind of lies to someone saying, "Oh, we're going to go to the shrine. Only women can be allowed at the shrine." And she disappears. But really, what she's doing is going to listen to a speaker, sort of like a radical, rebellious woman based on a real historical figure, Anne Askew. You learn after this powerful speech. And Kayla, did you recognize, are you a Crown? Do you watch The Crown? I
I've
can't
seen it.
remember. In the latest, no, in the middle seasons, this actress plays Princess Anne, Erin Doherty, and she just does a very good Princess Anne. So she's a good actress, and she's very like powerful when she's speaking, and very, I don't know.
Askew.
Sure. And she's firing up, people around her. And then you see her and Catherine go off together and talk. And it seems like they know each other pretty well. They're pretty friendly. It sounds like they studied together or grew up together or something, which is interesting. And she's kind of saying, "Okay, you're sleeping with the king, so you need to do something. You need to change the king's mind, or is she actually saying kill him? I can't remember."
Yeah, she wants Anna Skew wants her to kill him, but then Catherine Parr is saying that she can change his mind.
I see. Okay. I couldn't remember. And yeah, she thinks she can do it kind of in a more subtle way. And then Anne, who is quite a radical, is like, "You just need to cut off his head." So that's interesting. And, this is all about the Protestant faith. That's a lot of the messaging in this movie, is how, like, the Protestant faith, you don't need, a Catholic priest to translate the word of God for you. I mean, that's just a heavy theme throughout this.
Yeah, like you should be able to read it on your own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Bringing it to the
Have your
people.
own relationship with God and not have to just go through a man.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, and so it's even strongly, it comes across even stronger with these two women talking about it. So that's a good point. And throughout the movie, there is like a Catholic bishop, I think it was. Yep, a bishop who threatens her throughout the movie. He's kind of Henry VIII's right hand, and he knows that she's, you know, a bit of a rebel, and she's kind of always threatening him, and that's interesting to see. But Catherine kind of keeps her wits about her with the bishop. And eventually Henry VIII comes back from war. Eventually Henry VIII comes back, and at first she's very much holding her own. She's like, "I was a great regent while you were gone. I kept everything steady and solid." But then things kind of start to unravel, because Henry VIII captures the Anne Askew person. So spoiler alert, if you want to, just for our audience, in case you want to see the movie first. Otherwise, just keep listening. But basically, Henry VIII kills Anne Askew. I think we read burns her at the stake.
Yeah, and apparently she hid like gunpowder in her clothing and paper so that she would burn faster.
Okay,
Because I
smart.
think that back then they would like let it just kind of slowly kindle. Ugh,
Yeah,
terrible.
she must have accepted her fate and prepared, but um yeah, so that really upsets Catherine, because they were friends. She tried to get her to escape before Henry VIII could capture her, and she was kind of stubborn and wouldn't leave. She even brings Anne a necklace, a piece of jewelry from her own, jewelry set, I think from something that Henry VIII gave her, and tries to get her to use it to basically survive. They, at one point, she said, we sleep in hard beds and eat hard food. So she tries to save her. Catherine does. Doesn't work. And she's upset, pretty much. So there's this great scene where they're at the dinner table with Henry, all of the kids, Catherine, of course, at his left-hand side. And Henry starts to be really just gross, and he starts flirting with a young woman, a young Howard woman. So, he just before Catherine, he just beheaded Catherine Howard. So I think this is a similar um like someone in the family. And he flirts with her, and Catherine just really gives it back to him. And like, I don't know, I just loved her act. I loved Alicia Vikander's acting in that scene.
Yeah, it's like she can't help herself but to kind of stand up for herself. But isn't he doing that because he kind of has a feeling about her relationship with Anaskew or something, and he's trying to like pick at her? He's trying.
Potentially, I can't remember the order of things, Kayla, because
Well, no,
usually we
so
watch.
he gets back and she's like, I did a great job. And he's like, yeah, but I'm back. So you don't need to do anything. Just go be a woman. And then Anaskew dies, I think. And then, but he kind of, oh yeah, no, remember she has a really bad reaction to the news. Did you already mention that?
No,
And
do that.
yeah, so they're all outside in the backyard playing, doing whatever they do in the castle ground.
Falconry, archery, something of that sort.
Yeah. And they're all just hanging out and they she gets the news from her little guy right hand man. What's his name?
Was it Thomas Seymour or
The
someone
guy that
else?
she eventually will marry.
Yeah, Thomas Seymour.
Okay. So they're in the backyard and she's Thomas Seymour tells her the news of Anaskew being burnt alive and she has a visible reaction. Like she's like very upset. And she's just like has her hands over her face and she's like, oh my God. But then she tries to compose it. But of course, Henry's already been watching her. So he sees that. And so then she can't control herself. She goes over to him and is like, did you have Anaskew killed? And he's like, yeah. And she's just like, why would you do that? Like she just confronts him a bit, and then he slaps her or something. He's just like, how dare you even question me? Like, do you want me killed too? Basically. And then she's like, no, I'm a silly woman. And so then, then after that, the next day they're having breakfast or whatever, and he's kind of picking at her, trying to rustle her feathers, flirting with the girl.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. So that's actually, yeah, that's the better order. I got the scenes out of order. But exactly. So she has such a strong resilience about her. She's very um got a poker face all the time. She can hide her emotions, but then she slips up, right? She has one slip up because I think she got to see her friend and her childhood friend or something, and she just saw her a few days ago and now she's dead, and it affects her.
Yeah.
And that was such a menacing moment of Henry VIII. Like when you can see him watching her reaction, and then, yeah, just like, I think
Yeah.
he grabs her neck or, like you said, slaps her or something.
Yeah.
Eh, Yeah.
Well, I just think it's cool that we get to see this wife because I feel like most of his well, I feel like most of his other wives were like in their early 20s or just less mature than Catherine Parr, because I feel like she's in her early 30s or mid 30s or something. And so you can just see that she's very mature, but she still stands by what she believes and is a strong-willed woman.
Yeah, I think she was around, yeah, maybe 31 or 32, something like that. So I think you're right. Um, in The Tudors, she's played by, what is that actress? Oh my gosh, I just blanked. Jolie Richardson. So yeah, definitely a more mature woman is usually playing Catherine Parr. And you're right. And I remember also she said once before this scene, before he like kind of hurts her or smacks her, she says, he's never laid a finger on me. He's never laid a hand on me. But then here things are starting to escalate and kind of unravel. Okay, cool. So then it's kind of like they're sparring a little bit, like he's trying to catch her out in doing something wrong, I feel like. And she's just being very good and very true and still teaching Elizabeth and Edward about, I think educating, like she's in charge of their education, I think. And she still meets with Thomas Seymour a little bit on the sly, and you can tell they have a romantic attachment. And you kind of said this before, Kayla. This becomes her fourth husband, Thomas Seymour does. She had two husbands before this. Then, in some storylines, I don't know how true this is, I haven't looked it up. She was about to maybe marry Thomas Seymour, but then kind of King Henry gets in there and she just rolls with it. But then after King Henry's death, she does marry Thomas Seymour. So four husbands, and she's actually like um, the queen with the most marriages. I think she's known for four husbands. Yeah. Okay. Let's see, the dinner scene or breakfast scene, as you said, that was a good one. And then she's never been pregnant before, Catherine Parr, but she tells Henry, I'm pregnant. And I think this is where things start to get really just awful for her. Like he even says, at one point, are you sure it's mine? I'm sure he knows all the rumors about Thomas Seymour. And I don't really, sorry.
Well, she gets pregnant and then she's like, it's been a few weeks, so she's like, okay, I'm gonna tell him, and she tells him, and I think he's excited at first, and he wants a boy, obviously. He wants a spare because Edward's still alive, so he's talking about having a spare, and so he's really excited, but he starts just treating her like shit and stressing her out. So
Yeah. And at this point, his leg is just getting so disgusting. I think it said he's had the wound for 10 years. It's the infection is there. It's probably infecting his mind. And he just kind of starts to treat her poorly more and more. And it's just the acting is so good, though. It's like uncomfortable, as we said, but and our mom watched it with us, and I remember she even says, I was actually surprised, but she will stand by. She says this is a great movie. It's just hard to watch some of it. I almost thought she would hate this movie,
no, she likes period films like us. So
but this one's pretty intense at times, and I don't love medical injury stuff on the screen, and I was definitely covering my eyes a bit through that. I know it's real, and some people really like that gruesome aspect of things. I can't watch that.
yeah, I mean, it was cool to see a more realistic interpretation of that battle. I mean, that issue he had with his leg, and because I feel like the other movies don't really even mention his, because he definitely had problems with his legs.
Yeah.
And that was cool to see, I think. I mean, I
Yeah.
covered my eyes, but I got the gist of it.
We got the gist of it for sure. It's so funny because I can watch, like, I remember watching The Walking Dead. Like, that stuff doesn't gross me out. It's when it's like more human and more like realistic, where I'm just like, oh, medical
I was
dramas. Like,
it's very realistic.
so gross. Um, there's a really cool dance scene, kind of like a little festival, kind of Midsommar vibes. um, in people dressed in like weird vine like tree like costumes. I think you were like, this is creepy.
Yeah, I was confused by, I've never seen people like in the old England dance like that.
Yeah, and he even kind of taunts her and he makes her dance with Thomas Seymour, which is that's very Henry VIII. Like he can't dance at this point with his legs. So he's like,
Oh yeah, because they were sitting together and she's like, oh, I wish we could dance. And he's like, I can't believe you just said that, basically. He's like, she wants to dance, so Thomas, come dance with her. And
mm-hmm,
he's just rude to her and he's watching them like a hawk and they're whispering. But she's
mm-hmm.
like, I think she's like, don't, or like, don't say anything, or I don't know.
Yeah. Uh you can definitely like anyone who would watch them could see that they were pretty intimate.
Yeah. I mean, they were kind of conspiring against him, right? Like,
Yeah, there's definitely some conspiracy going on. Oh, and earlier you said that Thomas Seymour told him about Anne Askew's death. It might have been Thomas Seymour's brother. So there were two Seymours that were kind of um, prompting him, prompting her to kind of like go against the grain. Yeah, so there are two Seymour brothers. I have to talk about the costumes a little bit, Kayla. We haven't even mentioned that. So I love all of her gowns. So there's one in particular in a lot of the movie stills where she's wearing it's a green and gold. And it's just so regal looking, so beautiful. It's very heavy looking, which I feel like is very accurate. Um, a lot of pretty intricate detailing of the pattern. It's kind of like vine-like or that brocade kind of pattern and rich colors, kind of fall colors actually, red, green, and gold.
But what about
More.
that French hood?
Okay, Kayla's making fun of me because leading up to seeing Firebrand, I kept saying, Kayla, I think they got the French hood. Sorry, Kayla, I think they got the French hoods right. These French hoods are the most authentic, the most
I think
accurate.
every time we talked about French hoods, you're like, well, in this movie is when they got the French hood right. And like you mentioned it like 5 times before.
I know. And then I sat down with you to watch this movie, and I think I mentioned it one more time, and you're like, Carly.
I know.
But they did, though. I mean, it's it's very rare for them to get it right and for it to look good. And she just pulls it off. I think Alicia Vikander pulls it off. It's fitted well. It's very like it comes kind of, close to her mouth. And there's even like the little chin strap. And it's just put on it's goes back on her head the right way. It's not like a visor or like a halo. It's just, yeah, they did it right. Well done. Well done, costume designer Michael O'Connor. Okay, that's the costume designer. And Michael O'Connor did well, he won the Oscar in 2009 for The Duchess. Okay, so same costume designer as The Duchess, same designer for Jane Eyre 2011, which we mentioned, and that Louis Wayne movie with Claire Foy. So this costume designer, I think, is really accurate for the period, does does a great job. That's all I'll say about that. And we'll be sure to post these costumes, these beautiful, rich, ornate costumes on our Instagram accounts. So I have a separate one, period drama style. And then for our podcast, it's Swoon-Worthy Podcast. So follow us. We're going to post about this movie. Now, we talked about Jude Law at the beginning, Kayla, but I want to just talk about Jude Law in general. I mean, I almost feel like I wouldn't have thought they would have picked him at first because I always picture him so dreamy, clean shaven, bright blue eyes. He's just Jude Law. I mean, Cold Mountain, I think he's excellent in, Talented Mr. Ripley. The list goes on. And then they make him look so burly and mean in this. I don't know. He really pulled it off.
So we saw him in Hamlet and when we went to London, right? And so I've always kind of known from an early age that he was like a good actor. He wasn't just like, one of those romantic comedy guys from the early 2000s. But I think,
Because we do love the holiday.
oh yeah, everybody loves the holiday. But so I've always kind of had in the back of my mind like he's a serious actor. But I feel like other than like he was in the Talent Mr. Ripley,
Mm-hmm.
he was in the Holiday, he was in those Sherlock Holmes movies. But
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's been in a lot, but I feel like this one is the first one I've really got to see his acting chops. Is that bad to say?
No, not at all.
Like
I
he
mean,
wasn't he wasn't his attractive self. He was like this repulsive, sickly, disturbed man and like it was dark and it was rough and he transformed.
yeah. No, I think you said it
Is there,
well.
is there another movie he's been in where he's transformed like that? Because I can't really think about it.
No, I think that's it. I think he's a great actor and we've seen him in great things. Cold Mountain is definitely one of my
Oh yeah,
favorites.
Cold Mountain. No, forgot that one.
Mhm. But you're right that he hasn't transformed like this. I think that's a very fair. Oh, he's in an Anna Karenina. Oh wow, yeah, he was in Anna Karenina with Keira Knightley as well. So was Alicia. I bet they met back then. He was her husband. And I love how you mentioned, Kayla, that we did see him in person in real life. So I got to tell that story. So we went to London and we got tickets to Hamlet. And I remember we just split up. I think you and Adrian, our friend, sat in a different row. And I think I got on the sixth row. Do you remember not sitting together?
Oh, yeah.
And I swear, I mean, it looked like I felt like he looked at me. I know he's just seeing the
Wait,
audience or like,
wait a
what?
second. I can't believe you said that because I think you're stealing my memory because I was like, I remember I was freaking out because I was like, no, he was looking at me.
Well, maybe that's just what this they do on the stage. It looks like they're looking at you, but they're not.
I mean, that was probably the first like major theater production we've been to like that. So maybe
Definitely. This was like
that's just his
2010.
talent. Maybe that's just Jude Law's skill level is like you feel like he's talking to you.
Ooh, I like that. And I remember his physicality on the stage was really impressive. I remember at one point he like acted out like a crab because that was one of Shakespeare's lines and he like acted it out and it was really cool. He just, oh, he was
Okay.
great.
Well, I'm looking at his filmography. So from 1988 up until present day, he has been in 80, 89 acting roles. So like, wow, I'm sure we haven't seen everything he's been in, but for me, this one, I really got to see his skill level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, he's been in a lot.
Yeah. And I think he also, my favorite part, and it's in the trailer as well, is when he's like, we've seen this before and we cut them down. We cut them down. And he's like totally acting crazy, but that is such a great scene. He does that so well.
He really does. And I think he said that he and Alicia got a standing ovation or something.
Yes. I don't know about him. I'm sure he did, but I know Alicia got an 8-minute standing ovation at the Cannes Film Festival.
Wow.
Yeah. That's where it premiered. When I was talking about how he says we cut them down, do you remember what I told you about the use of we, the royal we?
Yeah, and it's funny because you and mom do this to me all the time. Y'all will like pick something random and it's like y'all both knew about it. I'm like, okay, well, I never knew this. Like, I remember one time y'all were talking about how when I was a kid and y'all were talking about I was washing the dishes and I was like, the soap suds won't go away. And y'all were like, that's because you have to use cold water. And y'all, she was like, yeah, cold water. I'm like, I never knew this. Like, do you remember that?
Not at all. And what do you mean cold water
So,
versus
you know, if
warm?
you've got like a lot of foamy soap and you're trying to like wash it off something, if you switch it to cold water, it comes off easier.
Oh, well, I didn't know that.
Okay, well, I remember I specifically remember you and maybe it was dad and mom, but I thought it was you and mom. I'm pretty sure it was you and mom because I was like, why did they not tell me? And y'all were like acting like I should have known that, and I was like, I didn't know
I
that.
well, sometimes we act that way to make fun as a
Okay, well,
joke.
maybe y'all did that with Firebrand because
No, 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 no. The royal we, so the majestic plural or royal plural, as it's sometimes called, is because royalty, especially in like the UK, like even Elizabeth II, right, uses we. So instead of just saying I or me, you're speaking on behalf of the nation or the institution. So you say we.
oh, I thought you said it was because he thought of himself as like God.
Ordained by God as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Or
like we, as in him and God.
it's kind of all of the above. It's just you're such a higher power compared to everyone else. I mean, yeah, pretty
He
crazy.
was like the most prideful person ever.
Henry VIII, man. But yeah. And I feel like Jude Law, back to Jude, he kind of like, he does his part so well, but he's definitely letting Alicia really just do her acting and just be like the star of the show at the same time. Um,
Well, no,
it,
I think she does that on her own. Like I feel like she's has such a like she really just draws you in, you know? And
mhm,
they both do, but yeah, he definitely didn't overshine her.
mhm. She's so great. And This almost makes me want to watch A Royal Affair again because that's like one of my favorite period dramas. I don't know if you've seen it, Kayla, the Danish one.
I don't think so.
It's so good. And
I want to watch Firebrand
she's
again.
so there's a lot that goes on, a lot of scenes of conflict and some of violence, of course, from Henry VIII and his wound, which is getting worse. He gets sick. There's talk of him amending his will. So she'd be regent to Edward when he takes the throne. And at a certain point, though, she does lose the baby. And in this story, he puts her in prison, right? He imprisons her. And I can't remember if that's
Well,
fact.
it's unfortunate because she was pregnant with her first child, I guess. I don't know if she's ever been pregnant before, but he stresses her out so much, and at one point he even beats her up in his room, and she gets away because I think he like was drunk and like passed out or something, right?
Yeah, something like
And
that.
so she manages to get away, but that of course she loses the baby because that's what happens when you stress a woman out when she's pregnant. And then he gets angry with her and like locks her away.
Yeah, yeah, I think she was sent to the tower in this
Oh, and a few
in
of
this
her
movie.
ladies' maids were also sent there, and she can hear them like crying out because they're probably doing God knows what to hurt them. I think they killed them. I don't know if they burned them or whatever, but she's like crying out to them because she hears them and she's just so upset.
Hmm.
And then, why did they let her go again?
Well, so Henry VIII he eventually dies, is on his deathbed, and he asks to see her, and she goes to him, and
And
there's a good
this is, oh, there's a good chance this is true.
no, this is fiction.
Okay.
And then so definitely not true to history. I mean, I guess it could have happened. You never know. But she gets to be alone with him in the room and he's on his deathbed and she finally takes Anne Askew's advice. She
Yeah. She realizes that it's better off for everyone if he just stops his tyrannical tirade, and she puts an end to his life. And I think that was an interesting perspective because I mean, we don't really know what happened. She could have done that. She was strong and he was weak. And
she definitely wanted to get on with her life and bring positive change to the realm.
oh, and we forgot something. So back when before she was imprisoned, he was on his deathbed. Oh no, wait. She He's beating her up, remember? And then she like, oh yeah. Okay, so let's back up. So she's pregnant and he's beating her up and she defends herself. She sticks her hand in his leg and he screams
Oh,
and it's disgusting, but he passes out and she's able to get away. And he's like, after that, he's like on death's door. He's like, she's like, okay,
yeah.
finally. Everyone's kind of like, okay, finally, maybe he's gonna die. But he freaking comes back and they're like, yeah, he's strong, and he remembers what she did, but then of course he starts going down again. That's when he calls for her to come back.
Okay. And just for our listeners, usually Kayla and I cover movies that we've seen like 20,000 times. And this is just one of those where we have only seen it once. We plan on watching it again, but apologies for some of our out of order of the scenes. It's just because it's a newer one for us. Um, all right. And so then we get to kind of learn about her legacy, about Catherine Parr's legacy. Obviously, Henry's dead. He provided for her and wanted her to be treated as, a queen of England, you know, post his death. Um, I don't think she in real life became regent, but she did still live with Elizabeth and was in charge of her education. She did marry Thomas Seymour. And then if you've watched um, other shows like Becoming Elizabeth or you read about it, you know that Thomas Seymour was pretty flirtatious with young Elizabeth, young Princess Elizabeth.
And they may have had an affair, right?
Yeah, like under Catherine's nose, she like caught them at one point in an embrace. We'll never know really what happened there.
But I think it's
But
safe to say that the men back then really sucked.
oh, for sure. For sure. And Catherine Parr was an impressive woman. I mean, she's the only one who survived Henry VIII. And that's what this movie really gets to show you is how she survives. And she published 3 books. I believe they were kind of like prayer books, meditation books, Protestant teachings. So that's pretty cool. And really laid the foundation for Elizabeth's beliefs. And Queen Elizabeth, as we know, became the greatest queen ever.
And she chose to never get herself in that situation by marrying a man.
Exactly. Like
They were
she's
just so
like,
power hungry back then. You just couldn't trust anybody.
right, even if you fell in love, because she probably loved um Robert Dudley, but like she wasn't going to be put in that spot. Yeah, exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it turns out that Catherine Parr did have one child with Thomas Seymour after all of that. She was about 35 or so. She had the baby, let's see, she named her Mary in August of 1548. And then Catherine died in September of 1548. So she died. Yes, they said it could have even been from like childbed fever. So, like, illness due to the lack of hygiene around childbirth.
Oh.
She died at age 36. And Thomas Seymour was eventually beheaded for treason. I know. It's just a crazy time. And it's always captured everyone's
Yeah.
imagination and
There was
their
just so much change going on, and there was so much corruption and politics and deception and control trying to go on, and there were so many victims of it. So what happened to,
religious turmoil.
yeah, what happened to their child? Did they it live long?
Catherine Parr's daughter only lived for a couple of years. That's so sad. Very sad.
Yeah.
Tragic stories. And, but I think it's important to learn about all this. And as we mentioned earlier, this book turned movie is a bit of historical fiction, of course, but it is based on the truth and real events. And it really captures the essence of what it would be like to live as a wife to King Henry VIII in his final years. It's a crazy story. It's intense. It's enjoyable to watch, but sometimes uncomfortable. And we'd love to hear what you think about the movie once you watch it. So we'll post about it on Instagram and let us know in the comments. You can also leave comments in Spotify now. So if you're listening to our podcast in Spotify, you can leave comments there and make sure and subscribe where you listen to us, whether it's, yeah.
And follow us on Instagram. We're starting to create more fun content on there, like reels and things. So be sure to interact on there and grow our period drama loving community.
Yes, it's a wonderful community to be a part of. Lots of love and just engaging conversations. So, thank you all for tuning in to our season 3 opener on Firebrand. And I can't wait, and we can't wait to talk more period dramas with you this fall.
Let us know if there's any spooky period films you're interested in hearing us discuss.
Definitely. All right, that's a wrap. Thank you all. Catch you next time.